It's Zach Eady with Purdue men's basketball, and you're watching Boilers in the Stands.
Welcome back, Boilers fans. This is Boilers in the Stands. I am your host, Greg Braggs Jr. Alongside me, as always, is our guy, Joe Jackson. Craig Bowers is underneath Mackey Arena right now talking to the head coach and some of the players after the game, so he will jump in if he has time permitting, on this post-game show as well, to get his thoughts on what he's hearing in the press conferences. So, Joe, let's get right into it. Purdue Boilermakers extend their streak of non-conference wins. What is it, up to 28 games now in a row? Or is it 20,
sounds right.
28? And then if they are able to win on Monday, that's 29. And if they can beat Alabama 1 week from tonight, that would be 30. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's focus on tonight. Northern Kentucky comes to Mackey Arena and certainly kept it a game. And it wasn't like an extreme blowout for a non-conference game, but Purdue held them in check for most of the game. So let's get right into it and get your instant reaction on what you saw at Mackey tonight.
Yeah, this is truthfully kind of how I expected the game to go. I thought Purdue was going to be in control most of the way, and it was going to be a little bit of a slower game. I think only 60 possessions for each team. It felt like Purdue was going to be able to pick apart the zone, and they did, and they found success. I also thought I thought Northern Kentucky, whether they're a worse team than Texas A&M Corpus Christi or not, I don't know. I would say probably, but I think Corpus Christi had dudes that could attack Purdue and use their athleticism, specifically at the guard spot, to get downhill, and Northern Kentucky just didn't really have that. And when that happens, now Purdue did a much better job, I thought, of staying in front with their guards. It definitely was not a perfect defensive performance by any means, but I thought it was a lot better. I thought you started to see some signs of improvements, and that's kind of all you're hoping for, or all I'm hoping for in a game like this, where Purdue should win. So I want to see them just kind of control the game. They did for the most part. 2, you want to see some signs of hey, they're starting to improve things, because yes, they have to prove it against better competition. A week from today will be one of the best teams that they'll play all year. But you're starting to see that. The defense looked better. Offense still did its thing, right? I don't think the offense is really a concern for anybody. TKR is still, he got his at the 4. Lawyer's going to knock down some threes. Braden Smith's one of the best point guards in the country. And then you got some guys contributing. It was good to see. I thought this was Jakari Harris's best game. I thought he's also been solid during the other 3, but I thought this was his best game for sure. And all the bigs, obviously Jacobson gets hurt, all the bigs at different points really flashed to me and showed the upside. I don't know if any of them put it together for the full game, but they at least had I think I would say everybody had at least a 5 to 6 minute stretch out of the bigs where I'm oh yeah, it makes sense if they're the one that gets 20 minutes going forward.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think Berg is somebody that can be steady and solid. Nobles and a few people are acknowledging that. Is he going to be a dominant big and that we've seen many times here at Purdue with different players? Is he going to develop into that top line big man in the Big Ten? I doubt that. It's tough. I think the story of the night, obviously, is Daniel Jacobson getting hurt and the severity of what that injury will be. It didn't look good. Obviously, just with his stature, being a young guy, he already doesn't have enough. He doesn't have a lot of weight on him as a freshman, but at the same time, just being as big as he is, he's always going to kind of have that kind of a frame, I think, his whole career. So to see him kind of get twisted up and his leg kind of buckle there for a second, we're not going to speculate on what that injury is, but we'll certainly be waiting on pins and needles because it definitely seemed like, with Purdue trying to figure out the big man rotation. He was at the front of that line because of the versatility that he does have. So we'll just have to wait and see what that prognosis is for him. Hopefully he's not out for an extended period of time. But yeah, Caleb First was able to get in there and get physical and be productive at different times. I think the thing about Burgess that we're learning is, he's certainly aggressive. I don't know if he's your typical freshman. He doesn't really look like a freshman. He seemed like there's a few times where they passed him on the three. He didn't shoot it, but he seems like he's always ready to shoot, ready to go up with the basketball. So I like that kind of aggressive mentality. I think overall, my biggest reaction of this game, I think every game I'm probably going to talk about Jakari Harris and CJ Cox because they're just exciting to watch. And it's always fun to see fresh faces and new energy come to a team and make that kind of an impact. And they did again tonight. But overall, I think the bigger picture for me is at times when they were able to move the ball efficiently and the ball starts really popping around offensively, whether it's in transition or in the half court set, once they find that rhythm, I think they can be a very dangerous team offensively. I think in the first half at one point, they went 7 minutes without scoring. And so you saw Northern Kentucky kind of implement at one point in the first half. They're going to guard the entire length of the court, which takes Purdue longer to get into their sets. This is something that isn't new to Purdue fans. They've been doing this for years, even in the Zach Edey era, make sure Purdue doesn't get into their sets right away. And that kind of puts them behind the eight ball of executing the kind of offense they want to do. But overall, if Purdue can pass the ball with efficiency and effectiveness and be quick with their decision-making, I think that's going to open up more opportunities, more possessions, more shots. And when you talk about Matt Painter being a big analytics guy, I think that's going to be the kind of mentality he wants to attack with this team.
Yeah, and I agree. And like I said, I think Harris was really, really good tonight. CJ struggled probably a little bit more, but he's been good the past 3 games. And still even CJ had his moments where it's like, oh yeah, like he ripped the guy twice. What did he end up? I don't know if he didn't score tonight 0 of 3, which is shocking to see. You just expect him to make every single shot, but still impacted in other ways. Jakari was really, really good. This team is like, because you mentioned Purdue they had that really long stretch, right, where Northern Kentucky could kind of get back into it. Purdue wasn't scoring. Purdue was still really good offensively overall in the first half, but even with that stretch, and they had that, and they couldn't score for a bit. And it just kind of goes to show how I think this offense is going to be a little more variance than normal. Last year with Edey, you could just kind of expect to throw it to him. And even if on the bad games, you're still going to get good production, this is going to be a little bit more living and dying by jumpers. And early on, Purdue couldn't miss. Then they missed for a bit, and then they started making shots again towards the end of the first half. And they still 1.28 points per possession in the first half is still really, really good. And it's just crazy that they can get that even without scoring for whatever it was, 5 minutes or whatever it ended up being. Hey, the big 3 of Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, TKR, they're good. They're pretty good at basketball. Fletch 4 or 5 from 3 again, 4 assists. There was still a lot. This was the first game where I was like, okay, things on both sides of the ball make more sense to me, and I like the process overall. I mentioned right in the Corpus Christi game, that first half, I tweeted, I was like, hey, Purdue's like a normal shooting half away from either being down or this being a close game. And Corpus Christi, cut it to 3 in the second half because Purdue couldn't hit a shot. I liked the process overall in this game better, though. It felt like even when they were missing shots, it was for the most part good shots. They still had turnovers with 13, but it felt like it wasn't as deadly. And then defense was just better overall.
Yeah, I think maybe one of the only bad shots that I can recall in the first half was when Fletcher Lawyer took that little heat.
Painter was not happy.
He checked 3. Yeah, they mentioned that on the telecast too. I didn't catch it on the broadcast, but it's always one of the first things you do when you watch a game is if somebody makes a mistake, just look over and see what Painter's reaction is. Certainly seems like he's just from the times that I have watched him, because it's like one of the, besides the basketball, watching the basketball, I think the number 2 thing I watch beyond the players is Matt Painter, because that you learn a lot from his mannerisms of what his expectation is of how the game needs to be executed on both ends of the court. But it does seem like he's kind of just letting this kind of play out, right? I haven't seen too many times where he's kind of losing it. He's kind of letting Braden Smith kind of find who he wants to be within this offense. I think that's the other big thing in this game, and we'll get into the individual stats. But, Braden Smith, I think his shooting has really started to, we're going to get deeper into the season. They're going to play tougher competition, and that's when we'll truly find out where everyone's at. But as it stands right now, it seems like Braden Smith has taken his shooting to another level than it even was last year.
And he's just willing to hunt this year way more so far. And that's exactly what Purdue needs from him. He only takes 9 shots, plays 32 minutes, has 7 assists, but just the types of shots that he was willing to take, pull up threes off pick and roll. And a lot of it was threes. Honestly, a lot of it was just pull-ups. And if teams are going to give it to him, he has to shoot it. We talked last game, this in a similar context. Heidi went 0 for 2 from 3. And for me, I mentioned on the post game, and I think even Painter said it in one of the pressers, like he wasn't mad that Heidi went 0 for 2. He was mad that Heidi passed up 3 other open shots. And
yep.
That applies to everybody on this team. If Braden has a pull-up, he has to take it because this team, 1, needs him just to be able to create, and 2, you just there's no guarantee you're always going to get a great shot. Like a pull-up 3 is a good to a great shot depending on context. You might not get better than that this year always with Edie not being down there, right? Last year you could just dump it down to him and you're going to get a great shot.
Yep.
Same thing applies for Fletch. I've really liked his aggressiveness.
And that's going to be the biggest difference, right? Because last year, if a guy had a solid to good open look and they passed it up, that was probably the right decision because you had National Player of the Year standing underneath who's going to, 9 times out of 10 make that bucket. So if you're not sure about yourself, you're going to pull it. You're not going to pull it. And now this year you don't have that. So when you do get that look and you don't have too many guys on this team that can create on their own at the last second of the shot clock. So once you have that opportunity, to your point, Joe, you got to take them while you got them and live for the next possession.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what Purdue is going to have to do this year. And they got the dudes to do it. They have dudes that can go and create for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, another guy that I think that is going to be key in those, because I think the one thing that I'm interested to see how, I think Painters obviously can acknowledge this more than anybody, but, last year when Purdue would go into droughts, you always had Zach Edey to lean on, right? And your rotations, especially with your bigs, was a little deeper. You could, sub in Trey Kaufman-Renn as your backup big. But this year, when they go into a 7-minute drought like they did in this game, you've got to be able to have guys that can get you out of that drought. And Miles Colvin here these last couple games, we weren't sure, in the exhibition game or the Creighton game, that wasn't even an exhibition game, to me, we weren't sure what Miles Colvin's standing is. But I think the longer this season goes, Miles Colvin is probably their best shooter. I mean, him and Fletcher Lawyer. Fletcher's got the resume, but just in terms of actual shot form and release, there's nobody better than Miles Colvin. He's got a pure stroke from the 3-point line and an aggressive mentality. So when you are a team that is going into those droughts, Matt Painter's got to find those lineups that are the guys that are going to get you out of it. And I think Miles Colvin is one of those guys.
And that's where I like Colvin off the bench as like the 6th man, is he can come in and just fire away then. Like he doesn't have to worry too much about if he's in the starting lineup, he's the 4th option offensively. Now he can come in off the bench and just kind of fire away, puts up 6 shots in 20 minutes, really balanced amount of attempts across the board, 9 for Lawyer and Smith, and then second is First and Colvin with 6 apiece. TKR had 5 attempts, but also 8 free throw attempts. So I guess that matters for something. But I like his role. I like his aggressiveness, even if he's not knocking out shots like he did today. 1 of 5 from 3, 2 of 6 overall. Somebody Justin Overman put up the comment, Miles looked better on defense tonight. I agree. There was definitely still mishaps and things to improve, but I kind of thought overall, like, okay, he's doing a better job staying in front. This is also, I'm going to go back to, I think, just a better matchup of they're not crazy athletic Northern Kentucky is, and that helps too. But they'll be how the guard rotation's happening.
They'll be tested next Friday, and Boiler fans are going to have to do everything they can to not overreact to that. We'll see if Purdue's ready for that moment, but that's going to be a big task for a young team with Purdue, the number 2 team in the country, Alabama, coming to Mackey Arena, which I think will be my first time joining you guys at Mackey. So I'm excited to get there. Yeah, of course. I would have liked to been able to come and watch them get a win. Hey, but if they can take down the number 2 team in the country my first time at Mackey, I'll take it. No fighting there. So yeah, it's going to be interesting as we start to move on to the next segment of our show. We instant reactions here. If anybody's wondering where Kraig Bowers is, typically if you're new to the program, this is typically how our home game, post game shows go. One of our guys, whether it's Joe or Kraig, will stay underneath and do the post game press conferences and get the video and ask some questions to the coaches and players, and 2 of us will handle the post game until Kraig or Joe is ready to come back. So don't worry, Craig's working hard on the beat, and hopefully he can come in and give his perspective. If not, if we end up ending this show a little early, it is a Friday night, and I know Kraig has to get on the road to Indy. We'll certainly be back and ready Monday night for more coverage. You guys have been doing preview shows to a lot of these games too, so make sure you stay on the lookout for those. Hit that like button while you're hanging out here on a late Friday night. We appreciate everybody hanging out. USC is up 19-7 on Idaho State, as I completely have stolen Joe's Big Ten Plus account. So shout out to Joe.
Yesterday.
Oh, that was yesterday. Okay. Well, they're showing it right now. It was on. I didn't see that it was on last night. Yeah, they're showing a replay of it. So I hadn't seen it. So don't spoil it for me, because I've got it on right now.
I won't.
Now that you mention it, I do remember you tweeting about it last night. So I should know better. But here we are. As I am knees deep in Chicago Bears ruining my life. So it's great to have college basketball back. Let's get into the second portion of our segment here. I don't know where you want to take this, Joe. Do you want to get into the stat line of the night, or do you got something on the dry erase board? Or are we going to save that, make people wait for the X's and O's with Joe for a little later?
I forgot the board.
You forgot the board? Oh my gosh.
When I get back home, it is going straight into the bag, though.
Gosh, our lives are ruined, ladies and gentlemen. Well, let's get into the rotational minutes, because this is always something that kind of starts to paint the picture of where Matt Painter is at with how he's trying to figure out his rotations. Obviously a little skewed here tonight, as Daniel Jacobson, as you see there, only gets that first minute in the first half and then goes down with an injury. Braden Smith plays almost every minute of this basketball game until it's, at the end. He played every minute of the first half. We can get into some of the other stuff, but do you have any thoughts to that? Because that just seems a little extreme this early in the season. Where's Matt Painter's thought process with making Braden Smith play every minute of this game until the game was over?
I think it's that this team looks way worse without Braden Smith on the floor. And while the game is still somewhat in the balance, he just going to put him out there. I also think, I'm curious if this holds for every game, then obviously what I'm about to say isn't accurate. I do think there's maybe a little bit of like Painter expecting this to be a blowout where he can rest Braden the last 8 minutes. And so he's just kind of getting him his minutes earlier and making sure that leads there. But yeah, that stood out to me too. Like I know people are wanting Braden to like play 30 minutes or 32 or something. Braden's going to play like 38 minutes a game.
Right.
And it's because Purdue, there is just such a drop off when he is off the floor. If Braden plays 30 minutes a game, I'm fairly confident that Purdue has a couple more losses on the season. And maybe that's something that you're willing to live with, but that's just kind of where I feel with how important and good Braden is.
I mean, how much of a risk is it? I know he's a junior. I know he went all the way to the national championship last year. He's built for this. But when you need this guy to, not just be the facilitator, but a guy that scores, quite a bit. They're going to rely on him to consistently score quite a bit of points here for this team. There were times last year where he wouldn't score the basketball much in an entire game, but he still would make a huge difference. I don't know if he's going to have that luxury this year. He's going to have to really put this team on his back. And to me, Justin Overman here in the chat says Braden's going to average 39.875 minutes per game. Seems like, especially this early in the season, I hate to question the greatest coach in college basketball, but it just seems like Oh man, like let's save his legs for when Big Ten play starts because we all understand how much of a grind that can be.
I think Painter just trusts the conditioning of Braden, to be honest, and I think he said it a little bit. I don't quite remember the pregame like practice presser, but I believe he kind of mentioned something of like he's just gonna play Braden, and Braden's gonna be fine conditioning. And I think one thing that does help is Braden is never going to, not never, 90% of the time, Braden Smith's not going to pick up the ball full court. If he had to do that on top of his offensive responsibilities, then I think it makes it a little more of like, hey, why is, maybe you do need to give him a few more minutes of rest. But since he does, not that he isn't exerting energy defensively, he can conserve it a little bit there. Also, yeah, you put the comment up. Painter stated Smith is in great shape and can go out and play a second game the same day. Like, I think that's just part of it. He trusts Braden Smith to be fresh and be ready for the heavy workload, and that's a testament to Braden's conditioning and also just his skill level. Like, that's kind of the nod you get when you are that good.
Yes, there's Facebook user and Blake Widmer and Derek Mulliken. Some regulars to our chat are yelling at me saying he said the other day, post game, that Braden could go play another game right after the game that he plays. So, I get it. I'm sorry. I will never question our Lord and Savior Matt Painter ever again. But it was certainly a thought
it's a fair point. Cause what happens if it is January 20th and Braden just looks dead? Like,
right.
That is a possibility.
Well, you get into those weeks where you have 3 games in 6 days, it becomes a grind, so, that's all. I get you're also trying to figure out your rotations and the only way to figure out who your players are is how they play off of Braden Smith. Exactly. Yeah. So that's a big part of it too. So,
that's a very good point.
Yeah. So I get it. Let's get into a little more of the rotational minutes. Joe, when you look at this chart, I know we've explained it time and again what it is and how it gets laid out, but what stands out to you when you look at this compared to the last game?
I think it's so, again, this is a little skewed because obviously Jacobson only playing a minute, and then also the last 7 minutes getting deeper into the bench a little bit. But let's take out Braden Smith and Daniel Jacobson and look at the minutes distribution, and it's everybody's between 12 and 25 that played, right? So a lot of guys still just getting minutes, and it's very much like Painter is very much just playing with rotations right now, and he's still just trying to figure out what sticks, what doesn't. Heidi basically only played at the 4 is something that I think stands out. The power forward, which is highlighted in gray, I think that stands out to me. CJ Cox gets all the backup point guard minutes when Braden Smith does leave the floor. Yeah, and then I think the other thing is that most of TKR's minutes came with Will Berg at the 5. Not all of them, but most of them. And part of that is obviously Jacobson being out, but it was just another thing that kind of stood out. Overall, though, Painter's just, especially at the big room, Berg, if Jacobson didn't get hurt, first, Burgess, he's just trying to see what sticks right now.
Yeah, I mean, and to your point about trying to figure out what sticks with the big men, there was a quote like a couple weeks ago. I was going to try to look it up, or like a week ago, where Painter was asked about his lineups, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm working on different lineups," and then some idiot on Twitter questions it, and the only way I'm going to figure out who these guys are is by playing them. So when you look at Caleb First, who gets a couple minutes, midway through the first half, and then some minutes on the back end of the second half, versus what obviously if Daniel Jacobson had been healthy, he certainly would have played a lot more. Rally Burgess getting in there a couple times, and then obviously Will Berg having the contribution he had. Do you think that is more of a reasoning of who Caleb First is and you still have to find out who these other guys are, or that those other guys are outplaying Caleb First in practice?
I lean that second one, although I think that second half today was First's best half of this year by far. Productive, made some layups. First is the one that's interesting because he feels most to me like the guy that could play 0 minutes in one game and the very next game play 18 minutes because a team has a very, very athletic stretch 5. First still feels like the only real option for guarding that, with just kind of his ability to move and be out on the perimeter if needed. But out of like more of a traditional, there's a cord just stuck in my foot. More of the traditional like center that Purdue tends to run, that probably leans more of the trio of Jacobson, Burgess, and Berg. I thought Burgess first half looked really good. I thought Berg overall just probably his best game. Attack the glass, and you just we can keep repeating it every presser or every post game show until somebody emerges, but like nobody's emerged. Everybody has flashes. Berg is probably the best rebounder to me. Burgess is maybe the best two-way in terms of being able to stretch the floor, but still attack the glass some. Jacobson's obviously 7'4", can protect the rim, can step out and knock down a three. First is the athletic, can kind of switch if needed out onto the perimeter. And then there's also downsides to all of them. Burgess is still, you saw him miss some bunnies today. Berg doesn't have the mobility. Oh my gosh,
that sequence with Raleigh Burgess where he missed 3 straight layups in a row that were like just the most wide open bunnies, 2 straight, and then he gets it stolen from him. That was wild. And then at the end of the game, he misses another wide open one, and he at least was able to laugh at himself a little bit because it was like, holy smokes, like you couldn't draw up an easier layup, but he missed all of them point blank. Obviously, I'm sure those will be few and far between, but certainly was like that was notable.
And that's just where like I think that sums up the big room right now, is because if you took out those layup attempts, I think Burgess looks pretty good today. But then all of them at some point have plays where you're just like, man, like, okay, I see why he's not playing for sure 20 plus minutes. Somebody has to emerge eventually. I don't think you can run a 4-man platoon at the big man spot. I don't think it's realistic. I don't think it's what would be best for this team. But also, like, I guess I don't know what happens if nobody emerges.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a center by committee, right? It's like a running back by committee room, and they're just going to have to try to use the strengths of each guy and try to hide the weaknesses. But, again, Daniel Jacobson, let's hope that he's okay, because just some of the people that I've talked to, it just seems like that's the person that they have the most optimism for in his young career. But, getting hurt tonight is certainly going to take a hit in his development, especially if it's for an extended period of time. Let's hope it's not. He was in crutches and he had some ice on his shin here after the game.
I just want to point out, and I'm not even disagreeing with the chats. I think the chats correctly. These are 3 of the last 4 comments. SLK Boiler, aren't we glad we didn't redshirt Burgess now? I agree. Derek Mulligan, the very next comment. I think with extended minutes throughout the season, we see massive improvements from Berg. 2 comments later, Jeff Nestor, I think first needs more minutes. And I don't think any of those are incorrect, is the thing. I think you can make a very easy case for any of them. And obviously Jacobson is, we don't need to harp on it anymore, but it's just, I wish there was more answers, but there's just not right now.
Yeah, well, Painter, always is searching for those answers, and I think we have a lot of confidence that he eventually will. But you can't force a guy. None of them are going to become Zach Edey. So you've got to lean.
I'm very confident in that.
You got to lean on your strengths, which is your guard play and some of the athleticism they have on this team. And let's hope that they can cover up some of the deficiencies, for lack of a better term, at the center position. And hopefully they can find a way to be contributors, in a positive fashion and not something that's hindering this team as they start to get into Big Ten play and then have their eyes on March way down the road. So a long way to go to, let these guys settle in and let's hope that facilitates. So unless anything else, you have any other thoughts on the rotational minutes, I think we can move into a little bit of the team stats of the game and talk about some of the individual play. And if Kraig is going to hit the road, we can finish up ourselves, but we'll see. Kraig Bowers might join us. He'll keep us updated with our text. I'll let you guys know what he says. Do you have any other thoughts on rotational minutes before I move on?
Nope, because
okay.
I don't even know what this is.
You're right. Like you said, I mean, it's Painter experimenting with lineups, so we're not going to be making any grandiose takeaways from some of the things outside of what we discussed here tonight. So let's get into some of the stats of the night. Purdue shoots 53% from the field, holding Northern Kentucky to 30% from the field. Purdue shooting 27 of 51, 41% from three, 9 of 22 from three. So solid. Obviously, the explosion last game in the first half, but 9 of 22, you'll take that any week. 64% from the free throw line, 9 of 14. So both teams shoot 14 free throws. 13 turnovers apiece for both teams. 11 points off of those turnovers for Purdue. 33 total rebounds. So both these teams kind of matching each other in free throw attempts, turnovers, and rebounds on the night. 25 defensive rebounds, only 8 offensive rebounds for Purdue. And then you have second chance points, only 11 for Purdue, 14 for Northern Kentucky. 34 points in the paint, so they dominate Northern Kentucky in that area, who only had 18. And then you have assists, 19 assists to 11 for Northern Kentucky, and then Purdue led for for the entirety of that game. So to me, the 19 assists certainly stand out, Joe. But for you, what stands out to you?
Rebounding. Purdue has the same number of rebounds as Northern Kentucky, but Northern Kentucky has the better offensive rebounding percentage and defensive rebounding percentage. Basically, how many rebounds you get given how many chances you were given. Purdue should not lose this rebounding battle ever, and they did today. And that is concern, and that's also a little bit of we haven't really talked about it on the show too much, but potentially a TKR at the 5 is, if they can't rebound with TKR at the 4, it's very concerning what the rebounding could be with TKR at the 5. And 15 offensive rebounds for Northern Kentucky can't happen in any game, specifically this matchup too. I understand a lot of jumpers for Northern Kentucky, which does lead to some longer rebounds. Purdue is switching a bit, but that was the very, very first thing that stands out, is rebounding was just not where it needed to be. Turnovers, I don't love 13 to 13. I like that Purdue forced 13. I don't love that they had 13. Would like to see that drop. Only a couple. I don't think it was as bad as last time. Quick side note, have to shout out Brian Tonsoni. Always good to see the guys again here in Mackey. Kraig is on his way up. Nice win for the Boilers. That is Tonsoni from Delphi Bracketology, also Assembly Call, friend of the program. It was good to meet up with him again in Mackey today. But the rebounding and turnovers, I know it's generic and it's something you can go to a lot with this Purdue team, but it really is what stood out. 9 of 22 from 3 is great. This felt like a more sustainable 3-point shooting game for Purdue. I'm concerned about the rebounding.
Yeah, 100%. And you got to be stronger underneath, and I think that's the biggest thing. When you talk about the different skill set of all these different bigs and what they can bring to the table, none of them are necessarily powerful forces, right? Caleb might have the most meat on his bones structurally, Berg too. But the way he carries himself too, it's just he can be pushed around a little bit, maybe not as much as the other guys, but we're spoiled. We're so used to Zach Edey just completely dominating everyone. But, I don't know exactly the landscape of every big in the Big Ten. As we start to watch some of these other Big Ten teams, we'll get a feel for it. But I think all these bigs are going to have their hands full, and they're going to have to be careful not to get bullied underneath. And the guards are certainly going to have to do their part. Braden's always been a great rebounder for a guard. I think Miles Colvin's able to get in on the action with his athleticism. So, the guards are certainly going to have to help do their part to try to chip in where they can. And I saw a few people in the chat saying hit that like button. Certainly always helps with what we're doing here, as Kraig Bowers is set to join us here momentarily. We appreciate everyone's support to what we are doing here at Boilers in the Stands, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Pass this along to your friends. So, let's get into it, or we can just wait. If you've got Kraig in your eyesights, we'll wait. All right, then Brian's lying to us. That's what it is. He's a rival podcaster on Assembly Call, and he's giving us fake information, throwing us off our game. That's what they're doing over at IU. I'm watching you, Brian. I know you're a fellow Bears fan, but we'll get into some of the individual statistics for the night. Let's start with Fletcher Lawyer. He 16 points, leads the team in scoring, 6 of 9 from the field, 4 of 5 from 3, 4 assists in 28 minutes of play. Fletcher Lawyer certainly has started this season out pretty hot, and that's always good to see.
Yeah, he's been everything you want from Fletcher Lawyer in these 2 games plus 2 exhibitions. Shooting the ball really well. Yeah, you are freezing up a little bit, Braggs. Just want to throw that to you. But like the 4 assists, this is what even last year I harped on, is like Lawyer moves the ball. He makes the right decision way more often than he doesn't. I think he's improved a little bit defensively. He's not like a standout defender by any means, but he at least has more potential, I think, to hold up on that end as well. He moves the ball. He's one of the few guys that can attack the rim. I'm going to continue to harp on that. You saw Jakari do it a bit. We'll talk about Jakari in a second, but Fletch just brings everything that this team needs from his spot. Knock down the shot, can get downhill, can get to the rim, moves the ball, and has potential to hold up defensively. Like, that's exactly what you want from Fletch.
100%. Am I still frozen? Just out of curiosity.
You look better now.
Okay, I look better. That's a start. Thank you. That means a lot. So I don't know if there's anything more that needs to be said. We know who Fletcher Lawyer is as a player in a game like these last 2. That's what you come to expect. Fletcher Lawyer, Braden Smith, they're not playing with their food, with some of the lesser competition, and they're certainly ready for the big dogs because they've played on the biggest stage. You mentioned Jakari Harris, this getting to know you period between him and CJ Cox. Certainly I think you're seeing how they can make an impact on both ends of the floor. Let me ask you this, Joe. Obviously you had your anticipations from your scouting as he was coming through high school to where, Purdue recruits him and brings him in. Hearing how he looks at practice is one thing. Now that you've seen him in a handful of games here between exhibition and regular season, what would you say? I think we all know that CJ Cox and Jakari Harris are very aggressive on defense. But what I want to ask you is, what do you think Jakari Harris does well that is going to be his go-to on offense?
I think it's a combination of being able to get downhill while also still knock down a shot. I don't know if he's like an elite perimeter shooter, but I think he is going to be respected enough, and that sometimes is more important than knocking down an actual shot. If defenses respect you and have to guard you out there, then that matters, honestly, sometimes just as much, especially for him, where he in theory could be, he's going to be a lower volume guy. He is, depending on the starting lineup, he is the 4th or 5th option offensively. He does not have to do a whole lot. He needs to be able to drive into the paint, make the correct pass, knock down an open jumper. He's not going to be tasked with too much more. And that's where I think right. There's going to be a debate, I think, eventually, of Harris versus Cox in the starting lineup. I think people look at Cox's shot making ability and are just like, oh, he has to start. I'm not opposed to him starting or getting more starters minutes with the starters. I'm not saying that at all. But I think with what is surrounding Harris in that lineup, it makes more sense with him being there right now. He's, I think, a little bit stockier defensively, can guard a little bit wider range of guys. CJ Cox also very good defensively. It's a good problem to have. But then offensively, I trust his ability to handle the ball. I think he's a little better facilitator than CJ Cox right now too. And so when we talk about being able to put defenses in rotations, keep them in rotations, that involves getting downhill and making the pass. The one play that stands out, he had 4 assists today. The play that stands out wasn't an assist. It was, he catches in the corner, drives baseline, gets 2 feet in the paint, and kicks out to Braden Smith. Braden Smith then immediately makes the extra pass to Fletcher Lawyer, wide open 3. Jakari doesn't get an assist for that. He does not get a single thing in the box score. That was all Jakari, though. That entire play was. And so when I scouted him in high school, literally I think the biggest note I had was he does all of the little things. And I think this was the game you're starting to see those show up more of. He had a good box score to go with it, 5 points, 4 assists, no turnovers. But he does a lot of things that don't show up on the box score too. I think that applies to CJ Cox as well. Like, there's going to be games that Cox should get 25 minutes. There's going to be games where Harris should get 25 minutes, and maybe some games both. But I guess I kind of got away from your specific question of offensively, but yeah, really just make the right play.
Just hearing the way you're breaking down, just his attributes. I mean, I think probably the thing that stood out to me the most is his ability to pass the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And like he did have the moment where it seemed like he was getting locked up a little bit. He's trying to get by his man. He can't get by his man, and he still knocks down the shot. That surprised me because I was like, at first I'm like, he's trying to get by him and he can't really make the move. But when you knock down the shot, that's pretty impressive, right? When you have Miles Colvin can hit a shot with a hand in his face, and if Jakari Harris can become a guy that can do that too, now you've got a few tough shot makers on the team. It's one thing when you hit a wide open shot, but you're not always going to get those. So, and I think Lance Jones was the guy that could hit a shot with a hand in his face last year, but he certainly was the guy that could get by you too. The other thing that stood out, and Justin Overman brought it up here in the chat saying the fast break from Harris to Lawyer was fun. CJ Cox was involved in that too. And that for me was like watching that in the first half where Miles Colvin had that pass to Burgess underneath. Like those were two moments where I was like, man, if this team can really get going, and it's not just Braden kicking the ball around, but it's the entire team. And you saw that on that fast break. And Jakari Harris makes kind of this circus lob to Lawyer as he lays it in. And that's the kind of rhythm and movement and energy that you're going to need to see from this team to get easy buckets. So that was certainly a great play there. So you like to see, guys that are facilitators in that regard. So love Jakari Harris's energy. And as you mentioned, he's certainly stocky too. So he's going to be a nightmare for the Big Ten for years to come. So excited to see him play. I think, if we make sure we highlight, what he did for the night, 5 points on 2 of 4 shooting, 2 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 fouls, and 21 minutes of play. No turnovers. So that's key, right? No turnovers.
Yep. And even because I think he did a good job. I think there was times he got sped up and maybe forced a bit, but it still wasn't like a devastating mistake. And that's also big to have with Jakari, with anybody.
Yep. And Braden's going to have his, turnovers, right? Because he's trying to do so much. So as long as the freshmen are staying a little more level-headed, that's certainly going to help. Well, while we're sticking with these freshmen, we're going to talk about him every night. CJ Cox doesn't light up the stat sheet. No points, 0 of 3 from the field, 0 of 2 from 3, 2 rebounds, 1 foul, 1 turnover in only 16 minutes.
And 3 steals.
Yeah, and 3 steals. Because they're not listed here. Thank you, Joe. So
if you click the other one.
Yes. And so he had nice steal at the end. He always picks somebody's pocket, right? So
really good hands.
Yeah. So your thoughts from CJ Cox's night?
Yeah, I think this is out of the 4 we've seen, this is probably his worst game, but it's also like I'm not concerned. Yeah, he missed a couple shots. Oh well, good shots in rhythm. I think in extended minutes as points, I think the facilitating will take a little bit of work. He's definitely more of a natural scorer. He has the passing to him. And then, defensively, he's just a dog. Like, he's going to be able to rip people. He's like just going to be able to stay in front. He has good screen navigation. So yeah, like he doesn't light up the box score tonight with his scoring. He's going to do that on certain nights without a doubt, but he's still able to find ways to be a contributor, specifically on the defensive end. I think my main takeaway is it's going to take a little bit of time for him, maybe as the backup points. Now, he might only have to play backup point for like 5 seconds a game, and maybe that's just not a concern then at that point, but not his best, but it's still nothing for me that I'm concerned about.
Yeah, 100%. I'm putting in the chat here, and Kraig just notified us that he's going to finish uploading the Matt Painter press conference to our YouTube channel. So if you weren't able to watch that, it'll be available on our YouTube channel here shortly. And then he's going to hit the road to Indy. So we're going to wrap this thing up and talk about a few more players. But if you have any questions to Joe, who was at Mackey Arena tonight, I'll be certainly happy to ask those for you, and we'll get Joe's expertise on those. And while we're on the subject, Joe, the last game, I believe it was the last game, I was watching the Matt Painter press conference, and the players press conference, and I heard you fire in a couple really good questions away. And I know you're not always in there because we kind of rotate who's going to be in there for post games. But yeah, as I said through text, I know I'm like the Papa Bear of this show, but I'm really proud of you, man. You keep it up, and I think we all acknowledge everybody that covers this team, everybody that takes in this kind of content acknowledges just how great of Purdue basketball mind and Big Ten basketball and college basketball in general. And so, now that you're in the press conferences, giving the hard hitting questions to Matt Painter, I know Matt Painter appreciates those. So
yeah, I appreciate that.
And the kids say, ball, my friend, and we're grateful to have you here on this program, making us all smarter college basketball fans. So, yeah. So, moving on, as I, have to give our guy Joe some love to break things up here. I don't know where you want to go with this next. We talked about the rookies. I always like talking about the freshmen. Talked about Lawyer. We talked about Braden a little bit, so I don't know if you want to stick to him or if we want to go to Trey Kaufman-Renn. Where do you want to take this, Joe?
I guess briefly touch on Braden TKR. Nothing too outlandish. Braden Smith does his thing. I think he's still going to have to. He's still figuring out some of the angles and things that he has coming off of screens and what he's going to be able to do with that. And that's where I think 2 of the turnovers for sure came from. TKR does his thing, 14 points, 5 rebounds. Maybe we'd like to see him on the glass a touch more, but that's kind of nitpicking. I think he held up pretty well on defending on the perimeter. I got nothing more really on them other than this is just kind of the performance you expect in a blowout type win where they're not playing their full minute workload.
Yeah.
And then from there, probably, I think the last thing we need to touch, well, there's 2 groups, the big group and then also the wing group. We've kind of hit on the bigs already. There's just a couple things for each of them I probably want to throw in. Start with first, 8 points on 4-6 shooting, 2 rebounds, 3 turnovers. 1 or 2 were just, I don't think the pass was great, and he was the unfortunate end of that. But you saw, I think, in that second half, him actually finally get some stuff to go at the rim, which is important. If he can convert at the rim, then that makes him much more likely to play. He struggled a lot last year. He struggled in the first game. It was good to see him start to get to that go because what he can do defensively, he brings a different element at that 5 spot of being able to be a perimeter defender, being able to be in that high hedge on pick and rolls. So good to see that from there. Burgess, I thought that first half stint was his best stints that I've seen from him. You saw a little bit. He's not Caleb first mobile, but he has a little bit more mobility to him that you saw a bit. He has physicality to him. You saw him dunk a couple times. I know he missed some bunnies in the second half. Rebounded fairly well, 5 rebounds as well. Again, you're just wanting to see improvements from these bigs, and I think from even the exhibition to now, I'm starting to see a little bit of improvement with Burgess. I know there's a few people saying he couldn't hold on to rebounds, and yes, but also he led the team in reboundings with 7 rebounds in 17 minutes of play. There was a few that he just ripped from dudes also. He feels like the best rebounder on this team to me, and I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but he kind of feels like that. Got a couple of shots around the rim to go. His thing is he can make the first defensive move. He just doesn't have the mobility to make the second. So if he jumps and he bites on a pump fake, he's done at that point because they're just going to be able to get around him. But yeah, I just wanted to make those points about the bigs. And then if you have something on the bigs, you can throw it in. Otherwise, I'm going to touch on Colvin and Heidi real quick.
No, I think Berg's a solid free throw shooter too. I mean, he's not the best, but he's a decent free throw shooter. And so I know there's going to be moments where he's going to be expected to knock down a few in some crucial moments, and I don't feel terrible about him at the line. So that was my only other thought to throw in there.
Yeah, fair enough. If Berg can knock down free throws, that's going to be a big help.
Yep.
I'll get to that question. It's kind of on top, but we'll get to it. Blake Widmer says, I notice when on defense, our bigs have a tendency to get sealed off so that a dribble handoff up top or at the elbow often leads to guards getting downhill to the rim with little resistance. Any thoughts? I would have to go back specifically looking for it, but I think in general there's two things with it. One, what coverage is the big playing? Generally, the bigs are going to be playing closer to its drop coverage is what it's called, where they're going to be closer to the rim. And so if a guy can seal, it can put him out of position. The other thing is it's also on the guards. Like, this team lacks guards aside from really Jakari and CJ that can get around screens defensively. And so now if the guard's playing behind, that puts the big in 2-on-1 spots, and that's tough for them to do. Their number one job is to protect the rim. I think the mobility isn't there for the bigs, which also hurts and allows them to get sealed off a little bit more. But it's a two-way thing where the guards have to be better, and you would like to see the bigs be a little bit more mobile. But it's going to be something that definitely monitoring throughout the season. And yeah, it's a good thing to point out. So last thing, I guess, with players is Colvin and Heidi. They're the two we kind of haven't hit on. Colvin, I guess we hit on Colvin some. Didn't shoot the ball great. He's going to get him up. I think the defense was better. I think this was a good defensive matchup for him. I still have cut some concerns with him guarding uber athletic and super quick players. I just don't know if he has the lateral movement to necessarily stay in front consistently, but I liked what I saw there for the most part. Heidi, he's just in the spot where he's just like, he's not like today specifically, he wasn't in spots really to score. He gets 2 free throws on the day. I liked what he did defensively for the most part. I still think he's the most versatile defender on this team. He can guard 2 through 4 with some ones, probably not all ones, but nothing too much on them. They're still, I think, finding their role. I think Colvin's found it a little bit more, and Heidi's still just kind of trying to figure out the role and his role specifically. And it may take time. The biggest thing is he has to stay confident. He had a really good drop off to Berg today. And at one point, like, different ways he can contribute. And that'll be important for him. Derek Mulliken asked, did you want to see more penetration in drives? A lot of the game seemed like passes and offense above the 3-point line without any movement towards the basket. So I think that's something I'm going to harp on all year. I don't think Purdue has a lot of dudes that can actually get downhill. Lawyer, I've said it multiple times, is like the best guy at getting downhill for Purdue right now. I do think they did a little bit better job than last game. 21 shots at the rim out of their 51, which is like what, 40% basically of their shots at the rim, if I'm doing my math right. So that was good to see. I think for this game specifically, that junk zone man defense that Northern Kentucky ran was designed to take away those things. The first 5 minutes or so, I thought Braden Smith did a fantastic job. They ran a bunch of pick and rolls, and he just got downhill and tore them apart. Then I think Northern Kentucky really started collapsing a bit more too. So I guess to summarize, it is something I want to see in general. I think the specific defense Northern Kentucky played though today makes it harder for TKR to get post ups and makes it harder for some of these guards to drive.
Well, that's why I said, and to me, the biggest key to this team being top level offense, which is probably a high bar to reach, but always striving for the top bar. But they have to, I think, be a team that starts moving the ball, and really kicking it around the horn. And it's not just Braden Smith being ready for Braden to cut and kick, and then other people are driving, and that ball just needs to be popping around. And that's going to break down the defense and then give guys, an ability from a leverage standpoint to, put their foot in the ground and make a move, whether that's, Cam Heidi or Miles Colvin or Jakari Harris, CJ Cox. They're all capable. But if you go one-on-one with 8 seconds left on the shot clock, they're going to have a little tougher time getting past their man. This is going to be a team effort, and it's got to be a team that shares the basketball at a high level. And I think then they can really take this offense to the next step. They got a bunch of shooters. They got guys with ability. You got Trey Kaufman-Renn. I think that's the other guy that we really, as much as we talk about the bigs, and I understand he's not a center, but Trey Kaufman-Renn is like the steady Eddie. 14 points, 4 or 5 from the field, 6 of 8 from the free throw line, 24 minutes of play. We don't really, I know somebody in our chat mentioned earlier, like, what's the plus minuses? We ignore the plus minus here on this show because it's a stat that's a little skewed. But still, he had a 27 plus minus if you're interested in those kind of stats. But Joe is vehemently against plus minus, and Joe is our genius statistician. And if he tells us not to pay attention to the plus minus, then we don't pay attention to the plus minus. You got it?
I'm going to add in, and you froze. So if you're talking and I'm talking, that's awkward. Okay, I think you're good now. Plus minus without any sort of context is what's kind of meaningless to me. If you can add in the context, that's where it starts making more sense. And I can, like, this plus minus for 27 for Berg, I'll point out, if we look through the rotation chart, if you see down at the bottom, right below, oh man, Aaron Fine's name, it's really small on my screen, under his Purdue margin. And that's what that lineup was, plus minus. That lineup was plus 13, Will Berg right there. That was when I think Purdue started 5 for 5 from 3. And that's where it's like, do you credit Will Berg for Purdue knocking down 5 straight 3-pointers to start the game? Maybe you do. And that's fair. And if you can point out, like, oh, I'm not saying he did, but the example would be like his gravity at the rim caused Northern Kentucky to drop down and be in the paint more, and that opened up threes. That's where, if you add that context, then I can be fine with plus minus. But just looking at a pure box score and being like, oh, plus minus, wow, that's where I'm like, okay, it doesn't move me as much.
Interesting from Jeff Nestor here in our chat saying Alabama 74, Arkansas State 70 with 5 minutes left in the game. I don't know if that's on any available channel for me.
Probably ESPN Plus would be my guess.
Yeah, I'm looking through here on ESPN. I got my tablet up. I got the Maryland game. They're winning 86-52 on Mount St. Mary's. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be available on
SEC Plus and ESPN Plus.
Okay. So that's interesting. So we'll have to monitor that. You know, obviously they're the number 2 team in the country coming in next Friday, but not if they lose this game. They're going to drop a little bit in the rankings. So kind of almost hope they don't lose. I'm sure they won't, you know, but only a 4-point game. So Alabama's playing with their food a little bit. But they, you know, having not watched them play, I'm sure it's like they are every year. Derek Mulligan's also adding against ESPN Plus, but Alabama living and dying by the 3 every year that I've known to watch them play since they become basketball relevant. So apparently they must be dying by the 3 here tonight. Kraig Bauer's giving an update as he's hitting the road to Indy, saying post-game interviews are loaded on Braggs in the Stands channel. Check it out after the live show ends. Lots of good nuggets. So if you're watching on Facebook or Twitter, we appreciate you tuning in. But if you head over to our YouTube channel, you'll be able to find all the different things that the players and Matt Painter were saying after this game.
If you do go watch, and you can watch in full, it is a little thing, but it does help us on the algorithm side if you do watch in full. But we appreciate any support. You know, definitely go check that out after the live show. Yes,
watch the whole thing in full. Bill in the chat saying, I am back, and so are the Boilers. Welcome back, Bill. It's great to see all these guys. Really, they've all been here. I'm the one returning with Bill for the first time. Blake Widmer, Derek Mulligan, Jeff Nestor, Nobles, all these guys, Justin Overman, these guys, SLK Boiler. Was always great hanging out with her here last year. Thank you to everyone here hanging out here tonight. Bill says he misses the board. This will be
going in my bag straight after when I get home.
If this ever happens again, Joe, where you forget your dry erase board, I mean, what are we to do with our lives when somebody asks a question about, dribble handoff? That's where the board then comes into play.
I have to be better.
Yeah, you have to be better. Clayton saying, Bragg's so right. Alabama 6 of 30 from 3 tonight. I mean, that's
just stop after Bragg's so right. And
yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's an easy one. If Alabama's having a great night, that means they're shooting great from 3. If they're having a bad night, they're shooting bad from 3. It's pretty simple with those guys. And that's why, last year's Purdue Alabama matchup that was in Toronto was great, high octane, and they were up at the half by like 30 points, and Purdue was able to come back and win because live by the 3, die by the 3. That's what they do. And I know that Matt Painter knows that, so they'll have a good game plan for Alabama next week. But we have one more game to go between that here on Monday. And some pretty sweet giveaways coming on Monday with the rings. You get the replica Final Four ring or the replica Big Ten ring. So I know a lot of fans are going to be gunning for those. Kraig says, hey, thanks to those that came up and talked to Joe and I again before the game. One person brought their 4-year-old to see their first game in Mackey Arena. So that's pretty cool. The final thing that I'll end with, I think this is something we'll probably bring up from time to time this year. We've moved on from the Zach Edey era, but I could not be more happy for Zach Edey's start in the National Basketball Association.
Yep.
The guy, they're winning right now. I mean, they're up 100 to 75. He only has 6 points tonight. He did knock down a three from the top of the key. I think he's shooting 60% from 3-point land on the year. They completely left him, said, hey, prove it, and he knocked it down. But overall, I think the other night he had 25 and 12. Then you see Valanciunas elbowed, gave a little elbow right to the chin of Edey, and Edey gave him this mean stare down. So now the players are starting to get chippy because they're learning what the college basketball world has learned. And this dude's a tough cover and a tough son of a gun overall. So you don't want to mess with Zach Edey, but I just could not be. I have become a full-blown Memphis Grizzlies fan now. I know all of us have, but to watch him kind of burst onto the scene here has been so much fun to watch, and could not be happier for him. I don't think any of us are really all that surprised, but he is one of those guys where you don't doubt him, but then even when he does it, he's just such a remarkable player to watch play, and to see him kind of jump out like he has early on. And he's got to be leading the rookie of the year sweepstakes right now. So good for him. We'll continue to monitor that. So it's great to see him shutting a lot of doubters up. Whoever the last percentage of people that thought that he couldn't hang with the big boys, he's proven those people wrong. So shout out to Zach Edey. I'm enjoying this Twitter account called Edey Muse, who literally follows his every waking breath and step he takes. And so I get all my Zach Edey updates from that Twitter account because he's got them covered. It's pretty funny. So that's it. My Zach Edey thought to end the night, but shout out to him. It's fun to see.
Yeah. And I got nothing too much more to add. I'm very happy to see Edey play well. Jaden Ivey's also been playing very well. He's starting to take a bit of that leap too, which has been great to see. I guess my other thing is I know that we have hung the banner, we have moved on, we are onto this season, and I absolutely am. But on my drive up here, I was just thinking, I was like, man, that was that Final Four run was fun. And I don't actually I know other fan bases and that will be like, oh, that's all you can hold on to, stuff like that, whatever. I don't care. That Final Four run was magical. I will have lifelong memories from that. And I was just on my drive up here, it just went through my head of oh yeah, that was a blast, and that was so much fun to watch. So I guess I'll throw in that comment there.
Yeah, for sure, man. There's nothing wrong with celebrating it. And as I said, they're going to be giving that pretty sweet giveaway on Monday night. So I know fans are going to be lined up early for that. One day they're going to build a Zach Edey statue outside of Mackey Arena, and we'll all get to celebrate that moment. I think the other thing too, and this would be Craig's jurisdiction, but I'm pretty sure I saw an update that Zach Edey's now on the board for the NIL committee for Purdue. And that's such a huge thing too, to have his presence in that room. And it just goes to show you that Zach's never going to forget where he came from and how he got to where he got. So, he'll always be attached to this Purdue program, as every player that's played for this program has. But he's certainly made a huge impact on this program here going forward for years to come. So happy to see him killing it on the NBA level now. So yes, Derek Mulligan, smash the like button, help the algorithm here at Boilers in the Stands. We'll continue to give you guys the content you're looking for, breaking down every single game. Now Joe and Kraig are adding previews to games, and we'll try to get into more weekly interviews as the season goes along, and try to bring on some different, media types, or former players, or even current players that we've built relationships with, and get some perspective from there. And then, of course, at some point, we got to shake down Bobby Riddell. I don't know what's going on. He's just ghosting us. I haven't gotten a text from him.
He calls one national championship game, and then he's
how are you? Miss you. Nothing. Haven't heard a word from him. Sorry I didn't get, We didn't get a chance to go to Wrigley this year. That must be why he's ducking us. That must be what it is. So I have to make up for that. We'll see. So, all right. Well, that wraps things up for my Midwestern goodbye. Thank you again to everybody that's tuned in tonight. Thank you, Joe, as always, for your expert analysis. And Kraig, shout out to you for your great coverage all night long. And make sure you check out everything that he posted on our YouTube channel from the press conferences. I'm sure he probably got a question in there as well. And you guys are doing a great job bringing the hard-hitting questions to Matt Painter. And so that's much appreciated. I know Matt certainly appreciates it too. So once again, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. We will see you here in a few days, Monday night, another game coming around the pike. So stay tuned for updates on shows coming up. Other than that, enjoy your weekend. Pray for my Chicago Bears. And always, always boiler up.